Welcome to the show that teaches you the things your parents and teachers are too afraid to, the heliosblog. Today, Rollo Tomassi explains female solipsism. Here we go.
The reason she's alone is because she's difficult.
Women are not accepting the bare minimum.
Women fuck men they respect.
All the women who say things like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, like, y'all impress me.
Women just gaslight each other and say what they want to hear.
So if you're wondering, because a lot of people don't know, solipsism is women's inability to see things from perspectives other than their own. Okay? It's a fundamental of women, that they can't empathize with you. They can feign sympathy. They can't actually empathize with you. They see things, all things, from their perspective.
Of course, everybody wants to say, well, where's the proof that women are actually solipsistic? And you have to understand what solipsism is in the first place, because when I was discussing solipsism as far back as 2015 on The Rational Male, and I think a couple of those essays made it into, I want to say they made it into my second book, which was Preventative Medicine. What exactly solipsism is and how it sort of functions as a dynamic rather than a philosophy. Because if you go and you look up the
yeah, it's not a philosophy. It's an inherent trait of women.
In fact, we could just go do that right now. We can just go look up solipsism. Let's do this real quick. Because
I believe from a philosophical perspective, solipsism is that, that idea that only the person, like only you exist and everything else is like an illusion. That's from a philosophical perspective.
Solipsism is a lot of different. It's a if you look at the dictionary, I'm just reading this off of Google right now. Solipsism, the quality of being very self-centered or selfish. Okay, that's a rough bonehead bumper sticker side. Now, the philosophical side is the view that, or the theory that the self is all that can be known to exist. Therefore, anything like sort of outside of the person is an NPC, or you're the main character in the movie of you, and the people who exist outside, people and the things and objects are just simply either obstacles or props.
Yeah, that's obviously not true, but it serves a useful baseline to understand like where girls are coming from. And this is why they can't help you with your problems, because from their perspective, you're not a thing, right? They can't teach you how to seduce them because they can't think outside themselves. Advice that women give, that advice is inherently, I will explain how to get me, but not how to get women in general, right? That's the idea.
More or less. So there's more to it than that. So I'm going to go through here and just read the wiki. This is from Wikipedia. I take that with a grain of salt, but it's good for definitions here. Solipsism, from the Latin, solus, meaning alone, and ips, self. Okay, so alone self, right? Is the philosophical idea that only one's mind is sure to exist. I think, therefore I am, right? Descartes. As an epistemological position, solipsism holds that knowledge of anything outside of one's own mind is unsure, and the external world and other minds cannot be known and might not exist outside of the mind. Now that...
So it's funny because it's a philosophical position, right? But girls genuinely cannot see things from outside their perspective. They don't understand that men's experience is not like theirs. They don't understand that men don't live the same lives. They don't have the same attraction triggers. They don't have the same likes and dislikes. They don't have the same wants and needs. Like, girls will have lots of trouble with understanding that, men don't seek the top 20% of women, for example. But women will always think that a guy would just ditch them because they're not top 20, right? They would hop from to another girl. Or women will assume that men can only have one girl that they love and no one else, because they assume that men are like themselves. But that isn't the case. Men can love multiple women at the same time. Women can't, and they assume that men can't because they can't.
That's the philosophical side of things. There's also a metaphysical side. There's a methodological side. And really the methodological side is really what I sort of focused on a little bit more when I was writing. I wrote 2 essays on this, Solipsism 1 and Solipsism 2. And the reason why I was sort of coming to this conclusion, I suppose, with respect to women, is that women are innately, naturally solipsists.
Yep.
And of
Indeed.
course, women like lost their shit when I said this. Right now, I didn't mean this in sort of as an invective. I wasn't saying this as some sort of like, oh, all women are just selfish bitches, right? No, that's not what I meant. That's why I mean, if that's what I meant, I would have just said that, right?
Yeah, it's not that they're selfish, although women can be selfish. It's that they inherently can't see things outside of their own perspective. And because they can't, they make all sorts of wrong conclusions about the world.
I would have just said, well, you know, all women are just like selfless, you know, self-important creatures, and that's, you know, guys have to deal with that. That's the reason why I use solipsism, is because it's a much more accurate term, I think, for the dynamic that I was describing at the time. And I'll read a few passages and just a few paragraphs from Solipsism 1 and Solipsism 2 so you guys get a better idea. But solipsism, as far as the female psyche is concerned, is that things, and I think a lot of guys really understand this, we prioritize women above everything else. And to the point where, like, guys say, well, you shouldn't pedestalize a woman. I mean, taken to its logical extreme, the reflection or the association of female solipsism manifests in men just as much as it does in women. And when we talk about a gynocentric social order, when we talk about how the importance of women is I think a driver for most guys, like, for instance, I'm going to throw this one back up here really quick because I mean, I thought this was, maybe it's not as egregious as I thought it was, but it's pretty bad.
Contrast the two campaigns here. On the right, you have Hulk Hogan and, you know, the UFC, and a version of masculinity where you're very straightforward and candid and say what everyone's thinking, and you risk offending people. And
okay, so this is conventional masculinity, right? Everything else that, what a great screen cap that is. Everything else that Scott Galloway gets into is this mealy mouth, wishy-washy, man bun, feminized version of masculinity. Now, he's basically talking about 2 different sides of masculinity here. But he's not. One of these is masculine, is conventionally masculine, and the other is conventionally feminine. Let's go.
That version of masculinity worked in 2016, where people felt for 30 or 40 years the establishment had just been lying to them and giving them
They're still doing that.
a bunch of blah blah to make them feel good in the short run and wasn't being honest with them. The type of
Okay, so that's masculinity. That's the Trump masculinity. This we're supposed to make that association, obviously. Hulk Hogan.
Right, and oh, it's so bad. You know, being masculine, ooh, how could you?
There, it's this ridiculous machismo of a oh, thank you very much, some guy. Whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah. Okay. This is great. Let's read it. Female solipsism looks like, well, I know all the other girls do that, but I don't. I mean, I do that, but I don't do it for the same reason other girls do it. I'm a good girl. I'm the one girl that doesn't do it the same as all the other girls do it. Yeah, that's exactly right. They all think they're special and different. Every one of them thinks that they're special. And they don't see the generalities, the common behaviors that they have with each other that lead to that thinking and those actions. They don't see it.
Female solipsism looks like, well, I know all in terms of like sort of cultural effects, right? Or it could be racial effects, it could be ethnic effect, whatever it is. And the reason why I do that is because different traditions and different cultures have different traditions. So, but there are conventional aspects of masculinity that are across the board.
Yep.
And so I try to focus on those things so that I'm looking.
That's right. Like dominance, straightforwardness, honor code, you know, strength, that sort of thing. That's masculinity. Prioritizing things over people, or ideas over people, that sort of thing.
Looking at something of a more objective picture of what masculinity is, as opposed to like what different cultures how they might express that. So, for instance, when the American Psychological Association, the APA, decided to deem traditional masculinity as a cause for concern in
What?
2017, and then by 2018, 2019, they decided that it belonged as a personality disorder in the
Okay.
DSM. So these are your masters and your priests of psychology deeming really what amounts to conventional masculinity as in some way a character flaw, or in some way a neuroses, or in
Right. So if you're not feminine as a guy, you're doing it wrong. Okay.
some way a personality disorder that is to be sort of treated and with therapy. And of course that therapy has to be something along the lines of what Scott's about to describe here. When it comes to walls, this is the walls form of masculinity.
Masculinity now, and the type of masculinity that is really resonating is walls. This is what we want from men. We want a guy who can coach football.
You notice that? This is what we want from men. We don't want Hulk Hogan. We don't want somebody who can go. We don't want somebody who can actually
fight,
kick ass, and save women from themselves.
Indeed.
And save women from being, beaten up on the streets of Manhattan when they're just randomly throwing punches at girls. Remember that back in March, April of this year? I remember Tim Pool said something to the effect of like, "Good, I'm glad women are getting like punched in the face." And people were like, "Oh,
no way.
What are you talking about?" Well, he only said that because it was bringing to light the fact that first of all, women believe that they could defend themselves.
Yup, which is also solipsism. They think that men and women are the same. Men are like them because they have trouble seeing things outside their own perspective, right? So they assume that what they can do is what men can do. They can't imagine things far greater than themselves. They're stuck in their own reality.
They can handle any. They're superheroes and they're victims at the same time. It's Schrodinger's feminist, right? It's the idea that, well, feminism basically teaches two conflicting ideas at the same time. One that
you're strong and independent and you don't need a man, and then
women are superheroes and they can
they're superheroes
and anything is possible for them. But at the same time, they're also victims, and that's interchangeable depending on the situation and the circumstances. So if
they're also the big bad patriarchy is the thing that has ruined them.
If young men are just randomly walking around the streets of New York smashing women in the face and running off, playing games by just like whatever the knockout game is, I have no idea what it was, but then what's the first thing they say? Well, where are the men who are going to protect us? Where are the men who are going? Where are the strong men?
Victim, but yet they ask for a certain kind of loser man to be the one to look up to.
And of course, those are the guys who the one guy who does step up, he's the one that goes to jail for it. He's the one that for beating the ass of some guy who was like trying to beat the hell out of some girl. That guy goes to jail. So that's what you voted for, lady.
Very stupid.
So that's number one. And number two is they don't really want that guy. They don't want.
No. And this is the true irony of the situation is they created the very thing that has destroyed them, right? They created the very monster that now is causing them problems, right? They have become the men that they want, and those men don't want them. And man, if it wasn't sad, it would be funny. It's a tragic comedy, really.
Want that. And they need to have their emotionalism checked by empiricism. In this case, the emotionalism is, well, we want a guy like Walls. We want a football coach. We want a guy who's like, this is the masculinity we want. This guy is not the guy that's going to go and put his face in front of another man's fist to defend Milady's honor. Okay, this guy, you think this guy is going to be the one that's going to go save some chick off of the streets of Manhattan from getting beat up?
He's not.
I don't think so.
Football, who protects his nation for 24 years. His instincts as a man are to protect. And
okay, that's right. That's an innate masculine tendency. And when your instinct is to protect, you go and get fit, right?
be empathetic and to be gentle and to be understanding.
No, that's feminine. Sorry.
No, those are traditionally and classically, conventionally feminine qualities.
Indeed.
Those are not masculine qualities. Now, it's not to say that men can't lack some sort of capacity to sort of be understanding and all that, be protective, whatever the fuck that means. But the thing is that we have been leaning towards that kind of masculinity, or whatever the fuck that even amounts to, and trying to lean away from this macho bullshit, machismo stuff since he was at Woodstock, since the rise of
the pill is what he's getting at. The bedroom fun revolution.
The sexual revolution. Since the sexual revolution, that's exactly what we've done. And here we are again. And I mentioned this to Myron on our interview. And I said, look, I've been on your show. I've been on Fresh and Fit several times. I've been on other shows as well where this has happened. But I've been on his show. And I've been sitting next to 18, 19, 20, 22-year-old girls who are essentially repeating and parroting back the same vernacular and the same lines as Betty Friedan. And
right. And the irony is that those girls themselves, Betty Friedan and so on, had husbands, knew their place, were alpha widowed by... There was one, I think, was it Betty Friedan herself, who was literally alpha widow to an actual philosopher that made up the womanism movement in order to get laid more, to create this dynamic of top 20%, top 3% guys having a harem of girls, and then the rest getting nothing so that he could get more. Created that movement.
And Gloria Steinem. And that's exactly what this is what Scott Galloway is doing in the 21st century, saying, oh, we need to get back to this kind of masculinity. Bullshit. It doesn't fucking work.
Doesn't work.
That's why. Because it's not masculinity. It is.
It's if you want to be the guy that is perpetually single and doesn't get laid at all, that is the philosophy you follow. That's what you do. What you do is act as feminine as possible, show no masculinity, be afraid of your own masculinity, but be afraid of showing it.
Femininity is what it is. When we're talking about like, oh, we need to go, sit around a drum circle and talk about our feelings, or float in some fucking fat manatees in some sensory deprivation tank and talk it out and cry it out and anger it out and everything else. That's what chicks do, man.
That's right.
That's what chicks do.
What men are supposed to do is, I'm afraid, I'm suffering, and yet I move forward, I push forward, I persevere, I get back up, I continue fighting. The warrior is not the man that wins. The warrior is a man that fights. You have to be willing to be a warrior. Despite the pushbacks and tragedies and hardships of life, you are pushing forward towards your goal. The train is barreling toward its destination. And you can get on it, or you can get off. I'm still going forward.
That's female therapy, is what that is.
Indeed.
That's not what men do. That's not a conventionally masculine way of dealing with problems. So, yes, do men need to get off their ass and do some things? Yeah, sure they do, but they don't need to do it like walls, okay? They don't need to be the coach. Oh boy, what a nice way of that is keeping the slave on the plantation is what that is. That's basically all Scott Galloway is talking about here.
And when Rollo means keeping the slave on the plantation, he means as opposed to teaching slaves to read. When you lie to men about what they need to do to actually be successful and attractive, when you lie to them about it, then men are never free. They never understand what they actually need to do, and so they're slaves their whole lives because they have no way of breaking free of the system that is making them, basically, if you believe what that guy believes, what will happen is you'll marry God and Tool, and she'll not respect you, treat you like garbage, and divorce you. And why? Well, because she'll treat you that way because you deserved it. Because you were never a man in the first place.
Here's get the slave back on the plantation. And I pointed this out, like I said, to Myron on the Thursday. If you're wondering where that is, it's on their channel. It's on Rumble, and I want to say there's probably clips of it on their YouTube as well, which I've got some clips that are coming up as well from that. But if you're trying to find the entire interview, you'll find it on Rumble. You'll find it on the Fresh and Fit Rumble channel. So if you want to go and look that up, it's already out. But yeah, the guy is he's a lady man. Look at his children. Yeah. Well, the problem with this is like it sounds good. It sounds like masculinity. It sounds like, well, yeah, that's what we really want. We don't want an alpha. We want a beta with a side of alpha when we need that alpha to come out.
Yeah, except there is no way for a man to be alpha and simultaneously be beta. It doesn't exist. He's one or he's the other. And you can't force fit a round peg into a square hole. It doesn't fit.
That's that's really sort of this feminist gynocentric fantasy right now.
Yep.
Is that men will be there to facilitate the reality of women, to facilitate the safety, to facilitate every life plan. I put this out, I remember, God.
Yeah, to help them stick the landing. They make a million mistakes, but they stick the landing because there's a man there to save them.
I remember put this one tweet out on Twitter at one point, and it was a very short tweet. And I said, look, men do not owe women a better life. Oh my God. So many women, men came out of the woodwork. Well, you have to put her before your needs and everything else. And like every guy who have ever.
No, it is enlightened self-interest. You breathe the air, the pressure mask from the airplane. You breathe it before you help someone else. If you aren't striving towards your goals, how can you possibly help someone else?
Ever said needs to get their mental point of origin straight, or how their mental point of origin has been sort of corrupted over the course of a lifetime. All of that came out of the woodwork. Everything came out of the woodwork when I said, Leslie, you do not owe a woman a better life. End of story. That's it. And I'll tell you, the thing is the reason why that
you don't owe them that. They earn that through consistent long-term good behavior. I've always said that. Test. Girl doesn't deserve it unless she earns it.
Rubbed people the wrong. It was like petting a cat backwards. It was like it rubbed people the wrong way. And I was like, why is this so like people could tell you, like they couldn't tell you exactly why it was like petting a cat backwards, but it did, and it felt like that. Like, it felt weird to have somebody like sort of vocalize it or articulate it like that. And of course, then everybody wants to say, well, women don't owe you sex after a date. Women don't owe you this. Women don't owe you that. Like,
we already know that.
There always had to be like sort of this counterbalance. That's a yin and yang kind of thing, right? And that only happens when you expose sort of this unflattering truth about female nature, which, by the way, is what female solipsism does. Is it exposes this is an unflattering aspect of female nature. It can be. I don't think that it has to be, but I think that nature and evolution selected for.
Oh, I forgot something about solipsism. Is women always tend to generalize based on their own experience. So they don't use facts, data, and statistics to generalize outcomes. They generalize based on their own perception, their own perspective. So if you ask them a statistic, right, they will say, I feel like, and that's female solipsism. It's not the truth, it is what I feel to be the truth is the truth. That's solipsism. What I feel, me.
Women who have a solipsistic nature, or have some sort of like solipsism is part of the evolved mental firmware. well, Rollo, show me the studies that show you that. Show me the data. Show me the surveys. Show me that. And I'd be like, that's next to impossible to do. Even if you had, even if you could find or sort of like manufacture an experiment that is.
There is one. You just ask women, like, questions that can be confirmed by data, right? And record their answers, and their answers are going to be not consistent because they don't see things as they are. They see things as they believe they are, and they don't use a scientific approach. They don't use a facts, data, and statistics approach to understanding reality. They use my personal observations view.
Completely innocuous and completely objective. Women aren't going to say, "Yeah, I'm a selfish cunt." No, but no woman is going to say that.
No, of course not.
Whether it's anonymously or it's you're standing in front of an interviewer right there. You can only look at things observationally, and that's why I was saying that there's different ways to sort of assess dynamics. Now, is that correlation? Yes. Is there a causation in there? Probably not. But all I'm saying is that when I'm talking about solipsism, I'm talking about it from the respect of like millions of guys relating millions of different stories over the course of 22 some odd years.
Yeah, correlation doesn't mean causation, but I mean, observe girls now and use what you've learned. All right, let's end the video there. Hit the like, hit the sub, hit all the notifications. Buy my books like Hunter M, Adrian L. Tom and Bobby Dylan, Renaissance Press, Brian, Andrew, Alan, Armani, and Nicholas. Shoutouts to you, most recent purchaser of both my books, Strategist Guide to Seduction and Quotes to Live By. Thank you. If you'd like coaching, message me at theheliosblog@gmail.com. Shoutouts to Nick. And my books can be found at bit.ly/heliosbooks. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Especially if you listen to the end. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.